Hello, so welcome to part 2 of this hub about counterparty risk and funding. In the first part of the course, we spent a lot of time to derive what I called this standard or basic reduced form, backward stochastic differential equations approach to the valuation and hedging of counterparty risk and funding. And the goal of this approach was to model the default time by means of its intensity. So the interest of this approach is tractability, as we saw. We are able to compute all the quantities of interest with a reasonable computational burden. Okay? But this was at the cost of a certain number of assumptions. Some assumptions related to the dependence between the exposure, so the mark-to-market of your portfolio, if you want, and the default time of the parties. Okay? So we had to postulate on our way what I call the immersion hypothesis, which from the point of view of financial interpretation basically means that the market factors can impact tau, but not the other way around. So it can be a model where the intensity of the default of a party is a function of a certain number of market risk factors, okay? But not a model where tau itself directly impacts the exposure. Okay? Likewise, we had to postulate that a certain number of data of processes don't jump at the default time tau of a party. In particular, we had to assume that there can be no dividend, no cash flow, no promised cash flow in the underlying portfolio at the exact time tau. Okay? And these assumptions were fine to deal with standard cases like counterparty risk on interest rate derivatives. And in fact, this was our standing example in part 1 of the course. Okay? But if we want to consider other applications like counterparty risk on credit derivatives, for instance, then the wrong way risk becomes a first order aspect of the problem, and we don't want to work under mild dependence assumptions like immersion hypothesis or no promised dividend at time tau. If we think, for instance, on counterparty risk on a CDS, the main driver of counterparty risk in this situation is the case where the reference firm underlying the CDS and the counterparty which sold you some default protection on this name would default jointly or in a small time interval. Okay. In that case, the loss would be very high to you since it is a time where the counterparty should, in principle, pay you the protection, but the counterparty is itself in default, so you will not get this protection, but only a fraction of it. And this would be the main component of counterparty risk in that case. So we don't want a model which ignores this component. Okay? And that's why to deal with counterparty risk embedded in credit derivatives, we need completely different ideas. Okay? And back to the usual copula ideas for portfolio credit modeling, we'll do something dynamic based on that, which we call dynamic copula models. We'll start by the well-known Gaussian copula that we will make dynamic. And then, since the dependence structure in this model is too poor, as we know, it's only one parameter, we'll try to do something more ambitious, and we call it dynamic Marshall-Hodgkin copula. Okay, so making dynamic a model with a richer default dependence structure. Okay? Which means that when this will be done, we will have kind of two relatively disconnected approaches. So this reduced form approach I developed last time, and for the sake of valuation and hedging of counterparty risk and credit derivatives, apparently completely different dynamic copula models. Okay? And difficulty with these dynamic copula models is that it's not clear at first sight how it is possible to also account not only for CVA, DVA, but also for FVA in this setup. okay? Because if you remember last time, FVA implies these non-linearities in the equations, and to get rid of these, to solve these, we really needed this reduced form approach. Okay? It means it would be nice, both theoretically, but also useful practically, to be able to develop reduced form approaches in these completely different models, so dynamic coupling models. And this will be our next item today, where we show how a more global perspective allows us to view all these different models in a unified framework, and therefore to deal with also FVA regarding credit derivatives, if we want. Okay? And finally, the last part of the course will be about the interaction between CVA, DVA, FVA, with an obviously related market feature, but I didn't talk about that much yet, which is multiple curves. Okay? So multiple curves in interest rate derivatives markets have clearly credit risk underlying or background. I mean, it is except it's not the counterparty risk of your counterparty, but then it's at a more macro level. I mean, counterparty risk of LIBOR banks in general, which imply these differentiated OIS versus LIBOR of different tenor curves. Therefore, we'd like to understand neatly the interaction between multiple curves and CVA, FVA kind of things. So we'll first develop a small economic model to try to really understand the meaning of credit risk, which is embedded in these different curves. And we will conclude by a complete example involving computation of CVA, FVA, etc. on interest rate derivatives in a multiple curve model.